Гюрча, я сейчас тот стул принесу. Сиди, я принесу тот стул. Сиди.
See it? It's hanging. Don't take that off. Are we on? We're on. Hi, I'm Swanee Hunt, and it's a pleasure to, I guess I'm welcoming you on behalf of Harvard and Harvard's Kennedy School, and also on behalf of Women Waging Peace, which is a great honor for me. This institution at the Kennedy School is very rich in understanding and in teachings about security issues and about the ways that military and government leaders make tough decisions. And we are very glad to be able to add to the mix of expertise here at the Kennedy School some alternative examples of how security issues can be faced in today's world. I teach a class on new models for social cohesion in divided societies, and today my class members who've been working with these extraordinary 100 delegates who've come from 10 conflict regions. My class, several students were saying, you know, what's so striking to me is how many different ways they find to do this peace-building work. You are going to hear many examples about how women with precious few resources come together to try to create ways of working for peace. They push their children in strollers in anti-government street protests, and they design curriculum for the schools. They develop businesses across conflict lines. They hold meetings in kitchens as well as in parliaments. They communicate not only through legislation and documents, but also they communicate with touch, and they communicate with music. And they find ways to reach from soul to soul. And they're sitting on the front row right now saying, that's true, yes, that's right, Mary. Gulshan, where's Gulshan? Gulshan, thank you so much, from Azerbaijan, from Baku. Gulshan Pashayeva. The first night we got together, we gathered up in my home, and Gulshan was playing the piano, and we all came together, and I knew truly this was women waging peace across the conflicts, across the cultures. As you leave, you'll be hearing music from Sudan that some of our delegates brought as well. Now, let me say just a brief moment about how Women Waging Peace as an initiative came to be born. Some of you know I spent 4 years in Vienna as the American ambassador there, and frankly, the Austrian-American relationship was doing just fine. And so I was sort of looking around for where I might be really needed beyond that work, and the Balkans were burning, and so I became very involved in several of what became the post-Yugoslav countries. And at one point, I had been active with about 40 different women's organizations across Bosnia who came together in something called the Union. They stayed organized all through the war across ethnic lines. And right after the war, they had a conference, and they expected 250 women to come from different parts of it was very hard to travel. You couldn't send faxes, the telephones didn't work. 500 women showed up. And a large number of those from Republika Srpska. You remember after the Dayton Accords how still deeply divided the country was. And I went to see President Clinton, who was about to announce the Bosnian Women's Initiative to strengthen the role of women. He was up at the G7 in Lyon, and I was doing the pre-briefing before his press conference. And I said, Mr. President, the women of Bosnia are the best story you've got. Make the most of it. You know, and he sort of looked at me a bit dazed, and because he was tired, and he said, oh, are they like the women in Northern Ireland? I thought that was so interesting, because I would not have said, oh yes, the women of Bosnia are like the women of Northern Ireland. But what I realized is that he needed a handle, and he needed an easy handle, and there weren't very many. I mean, we know about the mothers of the Plaza de Mayo because of Amnesty International adopting them as a cause célèbre. We know about the women of Northern Ireland. Why? Well, because of the Nobel Peace Prize. But very little attention has been given to this work all around the world that has been at the heart of areas in conflict. And so our attempt here is several tiered, but one of those tiers, of course, is to bring together the women to learn from each other, their strategies and their stories, but also to describe those stories and those strategies so that the policy shapers have handles. They have plenty of examples of what can be done by women all around the world. So this initiative that's taking place here for 2 weeks, you have a description of it, I believe. You were given an executive summary. Next Thursday is an extraordinary policy day where 200 policy shapers from Washington and New York and the EU, et cetera, will be coming in to learn from these women and to come up with their own ideas of how to incorporate the work of these women in what they are doing. The idea of creating this network did not actually come from me. It came from several women that came here to the Kennedy School last fall, including Katie Economidou from Cyprus, who said, you know, Swani, can't you think of a way to keep us together with a network of some sort? And Mirjana Dukmanovic, who's also here. Katie and Mirjana are out there in the crowd somewhere. Mirjana from Serbia, who was feeling very, very isolated and trying to figure out how can I connect. I see you, Mirjana, there. How can I connect to what other women are doing? And so the idea came from the women themselves, and I've had the privilege of really being in the role of the midwife, as our Cyprus delegation described me yesterday. The Cyprus delegates are not on the stage. You'll meet them out in the hallways and various places as you travel about. I have the privilege to introduce to you representatives from 9 other delegations, excuse me. And they're each going to say a very brief word, and then we'll hear from you all, as you're interested, the kinds of questions you have. So we're going to start with Diane Greer. Take it, Diane.
Okay, and I hope you all can hear me.
Is the mic working?
Is the mic not working?
No. No, it is.
Is it working now? Yes. Okay. Leave it to the Irish to get something screwed up at the start. But anyway, okay. My name's Diane Greer, as you know. I'm from the Protestant Unionist community, and I live in a town that is like New York. It's so good they named it twice. It's called Derry to some people, and it's called Londonderry to some others. And I'm sure some of you know the kind of nuances around that. I work in adult education, on anti-sectarian education. And that's as much as I'm going to say about my work, because what I want to talk about would be women's participation in the peace process. I know the world media has been on Northern Ireland for so long now, and I know that you probably know it inside out. But there are some stories that you may not have heard, And I know you've heard the Women's Coalition story a lot of times as well, but I'm one of the founding members of the Women's Coalition. And what the peace process offered me was a chance to learn how to get involved in party politics in 6 weeks, in high heels, going backwards. Okay? And women's participation, as you probably know also, has been really strong in Ireland, in particular in Northern Ireland over the period of the current Troubles. Women have been active holding their communities together when, throughout the period of the political violence. And then, but always with an eye on the table where decisions were made. And always with conversations about how many men were at the table. And there may have been some very good men at the table. There were some good men absent from the table, but there were definitely women absent from the table. And someone started to make phone calls to ask if we thought we should stand in the 1996 Forum elections. And I was one of those women who said, sorry, I'm too busy. I think it's a great idea, but I've got the kids, I've got the research, I've got my work, I've got etc., etc. And I remembered, or I thought, that every call that woman would make to other women, they would say the same thing. So basically, I want to share a wee story with you about those early days. And it's about, it was about how we got involved. It was about our first moments at the talks in 1996. And it kind of demonstrates how difficult and how complex it is for women to get there, I suppose. And the story is about, for years we had watched the men make all the decisions, and all of a sudden the Forum elections allowed us in 1996 to get 2 women to the table. Lots of women stood as vote gatherers to get 2 women there. The strategy worked, it was successful, and all of a sudden we watched television one night to hear the politicians talk about a 37-page document that they would review and report and comment on later, and this document was on my kitchen table, and I couldn't believe it. And overnight, I had put my toe inside the door with some other woman because I was one of the 10-member talks team, and we had a chance to get there. And the first meeting we had in and around the table where the major decisions were going to be made, where the Good Friday Agreement was negotiated, which led to the peace, which was part of the peace process we have today. We entered those talks with our papers speckled with spaghetti bolognese because our first meeting of our talks team to decide about our strategy had to be had in someone's house with strange children on our knees. I mean, I have no idea whose child I held. I know I was in Avala Kilmarie's house, and I know her child covered me in spaghetti, covered itself in spaghetti, and covered my precious 37-page secret document in spaghetti. So anyway, that's just a quick story. There's 2 other points I want to make, and I realise I'm speaking pretty quickly for people. Something else that was helpful in our current peace process was the United States turnaround in terms of, at one stage, the United States, the perception from my community was that the United States was only interested in how green and how Irish and how green you were. And somebody had the wisdom at one stage to acknowledge the unionist position, to acknowledge the unionist leadership. We, from our own community, may have had difficulty acknowledging that leadership. We may have had to look very hard with a magnifying glass to find it, but it was important that the US acknowledged that leadership because it certainly assisted the process. And to close, another point that I want to make is that, again, one of the gifts and one of the major contributions to the situation we left, and in fact we left our country 3 days after power had been given into our hands. So they gave us the power and we came to the United States. So that's interesting, and history will tell the rest. We go back to an absolutely new chapter, but what was a significant gift from the United States throughout this process came in the shape and the mind and the heart of George Mitchell. who was a wonderful asset. And again, the people who were part of that process know exactly the role that man played. They also know the important role that the Women's Coalition played. It may not have been there in bright lights, but history will tell the important role the Women's Coalition played. Thank you.
Would you pick it up?
Yeah, my name is Awut Deng. I'm from Southern Sudan. I hope my sister is very lucky to have international attention in Northern Ireland, which is totally different to Sudan. We have been fighting for 4 good decades, 44 years, and we never had attention to our problems. So I think you can imagine that this war started in 1955 before independence of Sudan. And we got our independence in 1956. So not to go deeply in the history, but the impact of war in Sudan, we have already lost 2 million people, plus 200,000 people last year because of hunger. And that was only from one region, not including the other regions in the south. We still have the issues of practice slavery. I think all of you in this hall, you will not believe me that there is a slavery still taking place somewhere in the corner of the world. But believe me, it is happening in Sudan. Our children, our women are being invaded, and they are all abducted, and they're taken for slavery. You can imagine that we have generation and generation have not gone to school because they do not have access to school. The whole infrastructure is destroyed. So we do not have school, and the children do not have a choice. When they are invaded and they are taken for slavery, they prefer to go to the military to protect themselves. Again, there is a massive displacement in all the neighboring countries in Sudan, bordering Sudan. We have in Kenya, Ethiopia, Central Africa, and you have some people here living in the United States because they have nowhere to live. They are forced out by the air bombardment which is taking place on a daily basis to our people. So those who have prepared to live in Sudan are forced to go out. Another thing on school again, that in Khartoum, a school are closed down and the children are taken for military training so that they could come and fight in the south. Again, there is no attention paid to this. The other thing is that to say, with all this, women, churches, and other people in the south are trying very hard to work for peace. And we have tried many, many workshops. We have attended many conferences to draw attention that we exist in the world and we also deserve the services that have been given to other countries when the conflict arises. But our cry, no, it goes nowhere. There is no answer. Little action is taken, but not much to end this conflict. The third thing I will say, I must thank Ambassador Swani for inviting us, remembering Sudan, that it is somewhere in the corner, and is also concerned that there is a human suffering that need to be addressed, to invite us here, to have this opportunity to bring to attention of American people that the war in Sudan has ruined thousands and thousands of people. And to add into this situation now we are in, there is already displacement of people again, because the oil is being subtracted from the Bentiu area, and the government is fighting around the area, and people are being bombarded on a daily basis. And all these bombardments are targeted to the schools where the children are, to the hospitals where the patients are, to the marketplaces where the people are trying to survive, and to the training centers. To close with this, my appeal is that it is high time for anybody, for international community, that Sudan exists and needs support. Support to end the conflict, to end the suffering of the people. Support really to say it has taken so long, more than any other country. I think we have suffered enough for these 44 years, and we deserve to live a decent life, restore the dignity of the people of the South. Thank you.
Thank you. Well, Sasha, you're sort of in the opposite. I mean, Bosnia has received so much attention.
Yes, but if we are speaking in a sense of experiencing war and conflict in my country, I must say that I'm born in a country which was full of diversity of ethnic communities living there, and all my life during excluding past 10 years, I lived in a very peaceful community which was very sensitive to all nations who lived in the former Yugoslavia. But you all know what happened then, and we were separated on the 6 independent states. And now I'm living in a Bosnia which experienced a war during the past, from 91 to 95. I'm 28 years old. I did my studies during the war. I wasn't a displaced person on refugees, but I deeply suffered from my people and my country who had almost 2.5 million refugees. And to tell you how much people are now living in Bosnia, it's approximately 4.5 million of inhabitants. So it's a half of the population who were refugees and displaced persons during the war. Most of them were women and children, especially youth people. And during my studies, I was very involved in the students' movement. And it was deeply affected me that a lot of my friends were in military service against their will, and a lot of them left the country. And even now in Bosnia, it's 300,000 applies for going out from country from young people younger than 30 years. So it's really complicated and tough situation to be a young there. That's why we started the initiative, and I was supported by my friends to start the initiative to gather the youth people from all across the ethnic lines in divided Bosnia and Herzegovina, like Svoni said, to start it some new perspective for the youth people, to start it to gather them, to listen them, to offer them a space for their gathering, for respecting their opinions and to addressing their messages to politicians. We started that initiative during the 1997, and we organized the first youth meeting. It was very tough for us. We gathered 60 youth people from all around Bosnia in one small city near my hometown. I'm living in Banja Luka, it's Republika Srpska area. And all of them agreed that we should have opportunity to live and express our feelings and our emotions, but none of them speak about their nationalities, which is very important for us, but they spoke about their feelings, how they should be active, how they want to organize, to be educated, to have different trainings, workshops, to have a youth magazine, which will be a joint magazine of all youth people in Bosnia. We started to lobby for the money, and luckily we got the money for that. So we organized, till then, to this moment, we organized lots of various youth meetings, workshops, campaigns, lots of youth festivals, and we gathered around 78 youth organizations, different backgrounds, sports organizations, youth theaters, youth groups, human rights groups, youth centers, youth sections for women's organizations, lots of different variety of organizations, lots of individuals. Over 38 cities in Bosnia were included in the network from all diversity of national communities. Right now, when I'm sitting here, there is a campaign in my country through that network, a campaign against corruption in our country. We raised a big campaign through the media, through radio stations, through the postcards which will be sent to all politicians in Bosnia and to all international community, and that will be our voice to raise some really important questions that we don't want to live in that kind of country that we are living now, and that we want Bosnia to be created as a country which will be respected in the world, to be respected from each their citizens, no matter their ethnic and national background, and to give them a note that you people started some really good things and nobody will stop them now.
Thank you. Really inspiring. It's very inspiring to think of those networks of young people. Anna from Colombia.
Well, thank you. Our conflict is not as recent as ex-Yugoslavia. It is as old as Sudan's conflict. And all my life, I've been a witness of our conflict. I was 4 years old when a bomb exploded in my house at home. In 1988, I was the editor-in-chief of the newspaper, and a bomb almost destroyed the building of the newspaper. And in December 1996, a car bomb exploded and destroyed my brother's home. Even though in the 50s, when the first bomb, I heard my father speaking about nonviolence, dialogue, the absurd of political riots and terrorism, and forgiving the material author of the bomb that almost destroyed our home. And the bomb in 1988 didn't change our position of working for peace and negotiations, and not to be never in favor of war as a solution in Colombia. And the destruction of my brother's home reinforced our idea of working for peace, dialogue, talks, understanding among people in our country. But it is not a fate of my family. It is a fate of all Colombians. Everybody in Colombia, every family in Colombia is touched by the war, by violence. We have a conflict with many roots: exclusion, political, social, economical, violence as a method of solving conflict by destroying the enemy, absence of a state. And it is very complex now, because we have leftist guerrillas, rightist guerrillas, and they finance through drug trafficking or asking for taxes for drug trafficking. So it makes very complex resolution, and that's what we need, the support and the help of the international community. Today, we are in a process of negotiation. We have an agenda, and we are a little bit optimistic because there have been changes in the way guerrilla see the solution, in the way the rightist guerrilla want to arrive to peace, in the way industrial people and landowners know they have a compromise with everybody in Colombia to reach peace, and also because all the countries in the world, the international community, is worried about the situation of Colombia and want to help in a sense or another. And as women, we have played a role. Women feel more intensively war in Colombia. They are directly affected to the family. They become heads of family, and their sufferings increase in war. So we women are organized. We have several, or let's say many organizations in Colombia, and we demand immediate attention inside and outside Colombia for our displaced population, 1.5 million by now, and especially for women because they suffer most. We demand protection for population in their sites to stop migration as a consequence of war. We don't want military intervention. We don't want international military intervention, but we say yes to international discussion on solutions for our country. And we say yes to support for economical and social projects in my country. The Confederation of Non-Government Organizations is the secretary of the National Peace Assembly and organize workshops all over the country to make people conscious of participating and engage in solution programs for our world, and to arrive to a collective vision of our country, because we are going through a process and we need a new political, social, and economical model. We women support all efforts to solve in a peaceful way our conflict. We have been asking the actors of war for peace and for serious compromise with negotiation. We asked in the past, when are we going to stop war and begin to negotiate? We are asking now, when are we beginning seriously our process? And we'll continue always asking when. Thank you.
As you were speaking, someone slipped me a note to say that another member of your delegation had a cousin yesterday kidnapped by guerrillas and murdered. And I'm just struck with how incidental violence has become in Colombia. Nata, talk to us about what's happening in the Trans-Caucasus area and Armenian Azeri delegation.
Thank you very much, Svani. First of all, I'm a teacher, and I work with young people like you, the students, and I'm very happy to be here with you. And I feel me as at my home, at my university. So unfortunately, as you know, we have a conflict between our countries, Armenia and Azerbaijan, over Nagorno-Karabakh. This conflict started in 1989, and from this time to 1991, it was a period of escalation of conflict. In 1991, we have an open war. So, in this condition, believe me, it's really terrible situation. We have a lot of refugees, thousands of refugees, hundreds of hostages, prisoners of war, missing persons, And what can we do? We ordinary people, we teachers, physicians, lawyers, in these conditions, but we need something to do, you know, it's impossible to sit and wait for something. So we, 3 or maybe 5 women in Armenia and the same in Azerbaijan decide to do a first step. Our first step was very, very simple. My colleague from Armenia and my colleague and friend from Azerbaijan, Arzu Abdullaeva and Anahit Bandur, visited Baku, it's the capital of Azerbaijan, and Yerevan, it's the capital of Armenia. They have a lot of meetings with ordinary people, with mass media representatives, with politicians, and we try to explain our position. We try to share our, you know, our feelings about war, about violence, and we say, stop the war. Yes, we have a conflict. Yes, it's reality. But try to do conflict resolution through negotiation process. And we are supporting this process because we are people, we are mothers, we are, I don't know, citizens of our countries. So after this first step, we have a very successful, by my opinions, very successful second steps. I am a member, and there are a lot of people here who are a member of organization which called Helsinki Citizens Assembly. It's international organization which work for peace and conflict resolution, for you know, for democratic changes, especially in our countries, in country in transition. So we find the friends from this organization and we start work together with this organization as a part of European International Helsinki Citizens Family. So now we work in, we established network which called Trans or South Caucasus Dialogue, and now we are not only 3 or 5 crazy women in this movement. We have a lot of friends, we have a lot of members, organizations and people who work with us. We work together. So you know, it's very hard work to work as a peacekeeping and then peacemaking, and there's peace builders. It's very hard work. It's very easy to have a war. It's nothing for our politicians, unfortunately. But we try to do it's hard work together, and we have a lot of transborder actions and activities. For example, in 1994, on condition of war, we have meeting of young people in a territory of Azerbaijan, and I took with me 10 or maybe 12 young people as you, and I was afraid because it was very difficult to me and for them too, but we do it. At the same time, the women from Azerbaijan were in our territory, in Armenia, and we talk about what we will do for stop the war. So, but we have a lot of everyday work. Our approach, you know, is a small steps approach. We have a special group. This group work on issues on refugees. Another group work on issues or missing persons and prisoners of war and hostages. So we have a youth network inside our big network. So now it's my hope that our maybe very modest contribution became our world more kind, maybe, yeah. And I hope that we, myself, me, I talk only about me, I became more strong, more kind, and I wish you good luck. and peace for everybody. Thank you.
Thank you. Now, Nelisiwe Bam.
Thank you, Ambassador Swani. Good evening, everybody. I want to thank you, Ambassador, for remembering South Africa, because these days South Africa is getting right to the background because everybody thinks we are now liberated and free. And people are forgetting that we are living with the scars. We still have scars to heal. I'm Nelisiwe. I work for the church, but I'm not going to ask you to pray for now. Perhaps if you come to my room, then we can pray. I work with the Anglican Church, with the women there. Our organization is huge. The region where I stay was a region that was ravaged by violence. We had big violence just before elections, when there was one organization that was saying they are not going for elections, and we had lots and lots of people dying. There was a time when we women in our organization came in to help, because the women and children were getting displaced. They ran away from their homes. They hid. They built overnight houses, and the floods came and they wiped the houses away. They were miserable. And what we did with the women, we organized prayer groups, and we would go to these informal homes and to go and do prayers there, so that the women who have been with us, whom we are missing from their homes and have come to settle in these informal settlements, could come up and say, we are here. Some of them came up. Others did not, because they were angry. Some were angry with God, some were angry with whoever had killed their loved ones, but it was just general anger. We are still trying to get those people to come up and go back and live a normal life. But what is happening in our country now is a very big change from the political violence into domestic violence. We have a lot of domestic violence now. We have a lot of women and children abuse. But the church in our country has always done the best job. The government itself has always called and said, what is the church doing? Please come and help us. And we have always come out to help. In fact, it is the church that helped the violence that was there before elections to stop, because the heads of churches and some of us women, we came together and we addressed the political leaders and said, look, this has got to stop. So what is happening now, because of this shift from the political violence, which has really got very down? We have this violence on children and youth. We have this violence on women. And of course, we are devastated by the HIV/AIDS. In South Africa, in my region, one woman is raped in 26 seconds. You are scared to walk out, because I was saying to my sisters yesterday when we were walking over to our host, I was saying how you cannot walk like that at home, like this at home at this hour, because you don't know whom you're going to meet. And the poor women are scared to come out and say that they have been abused, either because they are not sure of their rights. They don't know they can go and report these cases, or because sometimes, even if they do go there, they are still blamed. they are told, why did you wear such a short dress? Why did you wear a transparent dress? What did you expect the men to do? They had to rape you because you were walking alone in darkness. All those things that women decide to keep quiet and tell nobody about it. And of course the AIDS. The AIDS is so much because there's a myth which says if a man is HIV positive and he has sex with a child or a young person, they'll be healed. So they are looking around for young children. Our baby girls, grandchildren don't play outside. If she's playing outside, we must be sitting there and watching the baby play because anybody can come in and rape the child. Thank you. I hope you'll help us pray for this because this needs to end. We need to have freedom of our land that the Lord has given us. Thank you.
Thank you. Now my friend Nushat.
Thank you. My name is Nushat and I come from Pakistan. When we do not see or meet the people who are supposed to be our enemies, we somehow forget their humanity. We somehow forget how human they are, how like us they are. India and Pakistan have known war since their inception 3 times. And both the countries have made it difficult for people to meet by placing visa restrictions and all kinds of bans which would make travel difficult. However, women in India and Pakistan have gotten together despite all this. Actually, it reminds me of a story that a friend of mine told me, that in 1974, or around that, she went to a world conference on population, and there she was in Bucharest. It was a strange country for her, among strange people, and suddenly in a distance she saw a lady walking towards her, standing there in a sari. She says she automatically was drawn towards that lady, and so was she drawn towards my friend. And they met and they just looked at each other in bewilderment partly, and asked was she an Indian? And she asked my friend, was she a Pakistani? It's such a uniting force. We are very similar people. We share a background, we share a culture, and yet we've been separated by the inflexible positions that our countries have taken over Kashmir. However, I'm sure you will read about that, and you already know about it from books, so I don't need to tell you about that. What I do want to talk about is the amount of work and the amount of collaboration that women have managed to do despite all of our government stands. In 1981, during the time of Mr. General Ziaul Haq, there were a lot of discriminatory laws that he brought about, and a very political organization came into existence in Pakistan, which was called Women's Action Forum. And from then on, which was the first actually true feminist organization and a very political organization, which raised issues. Before that, Pakistan had had women's organizations, but they were mainly social work organizations. However, since then, women became very strong feminists, and a lot of meetings started taking place and conferences, and Pakistani and Indian delegates started attending them and going to each other's countries and meeting each other, they found a lot of commonalities. There's an aftermath of fights and wars and conflicts which are quite horrific, and both our countries have experienced that. For example, because of the inflexible stand, both our countries became fundamentalist. There were secular riots in India, there were religious overtones and fundamentalism, rise of that in Pakistan. There was a trend towards militarization, and now, as you know, nuclearization. But because of our meetings together, and because of the many collaborative efforts that have gone on in the past, what has happened is that, for example, this time when during Kargil fiasco, and that is Kashmir also, after that, I wrote and called out to a friend of mine in India, whom I had just met at a peace conference that was inaugurated in Pakistan. She answered, and not just her, she circulated my letter among her network, and there were a lot of absolutely the most fabulous answers, and I would love to share them. I'll probably put them in for everybody to have when the papers are published. However, talking about conferences, there were, I think it was in 1989, yes, at the South Asia Declaration for Peace, that conference, for the first time, women of India and Pakistan both together, and issued a joint statement, which was one of the first strong statement issued collectively. That was the first collective effort in which they demanded visa facilities, and they wrote out a statement which said, these are not our needs. The needs of the people are different from what the government seems to be projecting. And our needs were relief from poverty, hunger, disease, while all the money that we could possibly spare in both our countries was being spent on militarization. However, the fact of the matter is that after Kargil, or we hope because of the peace conference that took place in Pakistan and all the other efforts that have gone in, we should be able to get together far more often if we were allowed to resolve our conflicts, if our governments were not so adamant, and if somebody could help them to become a little more flexible. But on our own, our people would be able to get together and actually, deal with the real issues of life. There should be no conflict.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Well, we're taking you on a real world tour here, and we're going to stop two more places. We're going to stop in the Israel-Palestine area with Amne from that delegation, and then we're going to end up here in Boston. Go ahead, Amne.
Thank you.
Very briefly.
My name is Amne Badran, and I'm Palestinian living in Jerusalem, and I'm coming from Palestine. I'm here to share with you my experience working in a women organization called Jerusalem Center for Women, which has a sister counterpart organization, an Israeli organization called Bat Shalom, and both coordinate their work through a coordinating body called Jerusalem Link. I'm going to speak to share with you only my own experience that goes back to 3 years ago. 3 years ago, I was just a new graduate, and I have started working at the Jerusalem Center for Women. And for the first time, I encountered an Israeli Jew For first time, I make a discussion with an Israeli Jew, and I'm working with an Israeli Jew. We have joint projects, and I'm working with her, or with him sometimes on projects. And this created a dilemma inside me. I'm sitting with an Israeli for the first time, and when I sit with an Israeli, this means that I'm recognizing the state of Israel. I'm the Palestinian. I'm still under occupation. We don't have yet equal relation. I'm still the oppressed, and still he's the oppressor. But at that moment, I said, okay, but Israel is there. It's a fact, and it's a fact also that I'm the oppressed. But should I keep passive, or should I say that I have something to do, or should I engage in the work of other women who started the work before me and laid the ground for such a work by making political guidelines for the work of the Jerusalem Link? These women were wisdom enough and courageous enough to meet years ago from late 80s, and secretly most of the time, and they were discussing frankly how they can wage peace between the two people. And these women have agreed on guidelines, on political principles that are major to the basis of any of the conflict, which are the right of Palestinians to self-determination. And they have said clearly, for the first time, there was a statement made publicly speaking about the right of Palestinians to self-determination. And this was made by women, by Palestinian and Israeli women in 1991. The second thing is about Jerusalem, and they said that Jerusalem should be shared as two capitals for the two states. The settlements are illegal, and they are an impediment to peace, and the refugees have the right to return. For me, this was enough to start working at the Jerusalem Center for Women, bearing in mind that these joint projects are not very welcomed by the Palestinian community. There's a lot; they are controversial, and even when women do it, they always look. They want the qualified woman to do it, and who can judge who's qualified? So. It was at that moment that I felt that it's either I say, no, I don't want to be in this controversial area of work, or no, I have to try and see my way. And frankly speaking, after 3 years of experience, I can say that it's a strategy that I'm committed to. I want to, I know my rights, I know my needs, and I can stress them. I'm aware of my cultural heritage, and I'm aware of my identity, and I'm not afraid of losing them because I'm aware of them. But I can encounter the other, and I'm not afraid of the other. I know my right. So I'm ready to have dialogue with the other and to engage in dialogue projects. And because I want to break stereotypes, I let the other to understand my message and find common grounds together for working for the future. And the future is ending occupation and then normalizing relations on equal basis. Difficulties, of course we have and many difficulties. And one of the major difficulties that we usually face is the fact that there is always you feel that there is mistrust or there is something hidden. Or the media will misuse what you are doing, or the politicians will misuse the kind of work you are doing. So I think it's our role to pass to others that we are capable of doing the job. Our political agenda is clear, our vision is clear, and to be determined to moving forward.
Thank you. Thank you. Well, finally, Maria Contreras, bring us back to Boston.
We don't have to take a plane ni the train to experience conflict. We just have to look at our backyard, Roxbury. For many years, Roxbury was on the front page of the Gazette or the Boston Globe. And also, anytime we turn our television, there was a youth killed or incarcerated, or a mother crying because a child was killed. In 1995, just in front of my house, a van was going by this in the street, and a shooting started. And one of the bullets entered the van and injured an 18-month-old child. Few days before that, I went to the police to ask to please to come to survey the area because there was a lot of youngsters in the corner. They asked me how many guns they was holding and if there was anyone injured and if there was any blood. I said no, so they never came. And by experience that 18-month-old child getting injured, I didn't take the law into my own hands, but I took action into my hands. And I call upon all the neighbors to come forward and to help me in trying to alleviate the violence in our street. Because most of the youngsters that was hanging in corner was the children of the neighbors. And we didn't want to erase them from the corner, but to help the mother as well as the youngster. And I put upon myself a responsible person to be responsible for the things that happen in my community, because police only are there to act upon an event. And we, the community member, knew when something was going to arise. Then, for a year, I stopped in the corner, protecting the youngster with no weapon. They was getting in, and I was getting. I was getting in the corner. They was getting in. So they was getting in. I was getting out. So this is the way we was playing cat and mouse for a whole year until one day the youngster asked me, "Why you care?" Because no one seems to care about what happened to us. I say, I care because I care very much about me. And I am a very selfish person and a very crazy human being. And so I say, I mean business. I don't want you in the corner. It's obvious because I stand with you every time you're getting out. And from now on, I am the new dealer in town. I deal with information to training, jobs, GED programs, and we are here to give all the support that you need to make those transitions. But you're not going to be hanging in corner anymore. But me alone, I knew that it was impossible for me to do much. So I started telling our neighbors that, please, we have to do something that will stay for more than 1 year or 2 or 3 days. And we start gathering together and created a kind of group to make our neighborhood safe. And we start by knocking on people's doors and finding out if the other community member was feeling the same way we was feeling. If violence was one of the things that they was concerned of. And believe it or not, yes, there was. And it was a lot of isolation, a lot of people without health cares and access to the health cares. There was no job, there was lack of food, there was child neglections, there was abuse, there was domestic violence. All of those things that was facing our community. And with that, the Soldiers of Health initiate a movement, and regular residents, volunteers, working in Roxbury, living in the same street that they work, to improve the health and well-being of the residents and to make our streets safe.
Thanks. Good for you. You know, it's really interesting when we were as we've told people about the fact that we were including urban Boston as one of our regions of conflict. The response has been really interesting. The only place that I found someone who really objected was someone at the UN who just couldn't make the connection, but it seemed to be very meaningful to everyone else. You all have been extraordinarily attentive as an audience. It's very difficult to listen to 10 people speak, and I want to congratulate you on hanging in there. We're very anxious to hear some of your questions now. There's a mic here and over here, and some upstairs in the usual places. Anyone have a question? Yes. Would you identify yourself too?
Yes, I'm Felicity Spector, and I'm a mid-career master's student at the Kennedy School. I just wanted to ask you, you've spent obviously some days in each other's company, and I wanted to know what kind of common ground you found between your very different conflict zones, and how easy it's been to relate to each other as women from areas, or whether in fact you've still found that there are barriers between different conflicts in different countries, there are different issues.
Who wants it? Diane, take it.
Okay. There's the mic on. Well, actually, it has been very easy in my experience of the last few days to relate as women. Can you not hear?
No.
Sorry. Right. It has been very easy. Can you hear me now? It has been very easy for the third time. For us to relate as women. And I think there's a combination of things that kind of assist that. And one would be that we come under with some kind of common purpose. And we have come very much, I mean, it's my experience again, to listen to each other. And I have never listened as much. The Irish are not known for listening very much. I have listened and listened, and I will continue to listen until I go home, because I have learned new things, and I know other women are saying that as well. I'm sure within some of the conflict areas there are small tensions, but they're being worked with. People are willing to work with them, and I think there's an immense amount of goodwill. And I know this sounds corny and cliched, but that really is how it has been in my experience. And we just finished off today in the coalition building groups, and I think all the groups, we had about 22 people in each group, and there was a wide range of the countries we all represented, and we just cried. I mean, the last 10 minutes was spent crying, because we had built up in 3 days such a close relationship. It was wonderful. And yeah, there are a few of us here out of ours, and it was very painful parting, although we're going to be here until the 17th or 18th. So I'm sure there are tensions between maybe people from conflict areas. We had one woman today from the Cyprus group, and I'm sorry they're not here, but I suppose they're somewhere where we would have been maybe 5 years ago. And one woman, the Greek, the Turkish woman was able to turn to the Greek Cypriot, is that right? And tell her how valuable the contact had been, and it was a wonderful moment for any of us who were in that group today to witness. So has that answered your question?
Yes, very much.
Okay, you see, the difficulty that our delegates have is not simply crossing each other's cultures, but most of the delegations represent different sides of the conflict. So for the Cypriots, they can't meet on the island, so it's very, very unusual for them to be together. Similarly, for the Sudanese, I mean, you know, there are people here who have never been outside of Khartoum. Right.
Yeah.
Another question. Thank you. Yes.
Hi, my name is Allegra Calder, and I'm a graduate student in urban studies. I had a question for the women who've been working in the peace process for a number of years. I think often when you talk to people, they get very excited about what it is you're doing. How do you work to sustain that interest? How do you keep people on board, and how do you keep at it for so long? Because I imagine there's quite a bit of frustration involved.
How do you overcome the frustration and the years after years after years. Yes, Maria.
I think the frustration is what keeps us going. Because I don't give hope. I don't give up on hope. If I give up on hope, the young generation then don't have nothing to look forward. So I have to keep within the strength of the yes, something can happen.
Yes.
My name is Duriya Faruqi, and I'm an international student here from Pakistan. And my question is regarding a common tone that I've heard today, and that's been international attention. And it seems that international attention on a lot of very important issues comes and goes according to what is, I guess, politically in vogue at the time. And I wanted to find out what your experience has been in collaborating with each other and with other women fighting these issues on getting the media to give attention to these issues more systematically and more consistently.
Mm-hmm. Anna, you're part of a media group, aren't you, that's working together here? We have a lot of media people, in fact. We asked in the delegations that at least 1 or 2 people out of the delegations of 10 have professional media experience. Mm-hmm. Would you like to address that?
Yes, well, it is really very important to make media conscious of the role in solving conflicts in each country. In Colombia, we have been working even at the top level of directors to analyze and criticize ourselves of our role in increasing the conflict and how we can work for a culture of peace. And not only that, but how we manage news about the conflict and to avoid sensationalism and to avoid the idea of being the first and make more conscious coverage and make people work for peace and for democracy. On the other hand, a good experience we have had is getting people involved in the conflict as actors or victims or workers for peace to participate in dialogues through media, so that we get different ideas, different positions, the coincidences, and the differences that need to be overcome. We had that experience in the newspaper I work for, and it has been an excellent experience. I think it is very important in conflict not to exclude. And I knew of a similar experience in Ireland, where the different newspapers of the different factions decided to publish others' opinion. And that was a very strong contribution to the beginning of the solution in Ireland also.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
My name is Carol. I'm from Emerson College. I'm an international student as well from Jordan. And my question is, you all come from different backgrounds and different cultures. Has that been a challenge for you in talking and exchanging ideas and experiences?
Well, I'd love to hear from Awad on that, since yours is the most, I think, separate.
I think it has been a strength. Listening to stories from different countries and problems that are facing them. It has become a learning stories and so much enriching in our ideas and in our work, because people have different strategies, but there are commonalities that bring them together. And as for Sudan, I think we will be able to do much, much better from this conference, because we are a people close in the bushes there. We don't meet people. We hear about people, what they are doing, but people do not know what we are doing. But we had a chance this time that we were meeting the people that we have not met, and we have heard from them. And I think it's also a good connection to us, that whenever we want to talk, we will have people to contact them, and let them know about our situation. Did I answer your question?
Nata, you also, to us, feel very removed. Obviously, you don't feel removed to you. You know, but talk to us about what it's like from the Transcaucasus area.
You know, it's a very interesting question, because my feeling is common culture space is over the world. Common, you know, it's in our relationship with Azerbaijan. Armenian are Christians. Azerbaijan are Muslims. There are different cultures. There are different religions. But in the, on the other hand, we live in the Caucasus. It's our common home. So it's very interesting for our delegation, for us to have a choice to meet people from other countries, for other cultures, because you know, it's very important. By my feeling, we are only one small part of very big space, of multicultural space, multi-religion space. So I think it was very useful, especially for me as a teacher, to meet women from different countries, from different cultures, and I bring together with me a piece of your feelings, a piece of your heart. Thank you for these opportunities.
Just think what it was like for the delegations to decide who would be sitting on this stage when they represented groups that were recently or even still at war with each other. Imagine. Yes, Neil.
I have sort of an odd question that was just sort of eating at me, which is that if women are the center of peace across all these different cultures, the question was just eating at me, why are men the center of war across all these cultures? I know it calls for some speculation, but you're from all different parts of the world with all different kinds of language and historical cultures. Is it men have power and power leads to war? What can you speculate, please?
What do you think, Nisan?
Yes, I could speculate. And I could only speculate. But however, yes, as a woman, shall I tell you a little thing about myself?
Sure.
I spent my early years of life being a total tomboy, hating the idea of being a woman. And I think till the age of 13, I still hoped and believed that if I developed muscles, I'd somehow or the other become a boy and have the freedom that boys have. But believe me, the day I turned a woman, it was the happiest day of my life, truly a woman. By that I mean, I think it settled a kind of peace within me. And what I learned was to connect, to empathize. In a man's world, I'd learned to sympathize. You know, there are these people out there whom you feel sorry for, whom you want to go and do something for. Women behave differently. And I think this is what happened in our own group here. We empathized with each other. You know, when I heard about something happening in Bosnia, or when I heard about Sudan, and I said, I can empathize with that. You know what happened? That's exactly what happened in my country. There was a culture of violence that developed from very small little differences. And we began to see the connections, started seeing in our own behavior, started seeing how we behaved differently. We never went out. For example, the Israeli, Debbie told a story when she was telling her story, and it was a silent protest, women in black, but consistently, you know, the ability to keep at it to make peace is what women have, perhaps. The ability to keep at it, the impatience, the qualities that you were talking about, the impatience, perhaps in a man's world, to hurry up, to get the tasks done. This is what you have to do. And you put things into little boxes. And perhaps women, because they're always overflowing themselves. Is that true? I don't know. I always think we live beyond ourselves, you know.
Can I just add something to that? Because in our group at some stage, we talked about, yes, we believed that men tended to be warmongers, but women have been violent when war has been happening. And that's a phenomenon that's quite difficult for most women to understand. So the overwhelming numbers of women are peacemakers, but it's quite an interesting phenomenon to think about women as violating and being violent too. I mean, for example, we had a story of a woman in India who threw a small boy, a Muslim boy of 11, on a burning, they burned him to death. Someone talked, Awut, you had some stories, did you, about when they burned the cow dung? And it wasn't women who threw the children on the fire. No, children were thrown on the fire. But there were some other examples of where women had, in Germany, for example, it's well documented. And that's quite interesting, and I'm not sure what that's about.
So it's not a complete either or, but we hear a lot about sort of general feelings. Anna, you want to comment on that?
Yeah, I may add something. It's the fact that the decision makers mainly are men, and they speak about we speak here about power, and when we speak about that power counts. He does not. He makes decisions according to power, the balance of power. But women are the ones who feel what the results of a conflict. They are those who suffer more as victims with their children, and as when they lose a husband or lose a brother or a son. So they are the ones who suffer poverty and suffer the lack of fulfillment of their needs when there is a conflict, more than men who are staying there, making decisions, counting what is on the balance of power. This is why I feel that women can read the conflict sometimes in another way than men, and sometimes in a better way than men, because they have different priorities.
Well, everyone wants to add to this now. Awut and Anna, and then Meliswe, I'm going to ask you to close up the whole forum. But first, Awut and Anna.
Yes, the whole idea is that the men do not suffer. It is the woman who carried the child for 9 months and labor. So whatever distraction comes is more painful. But for a man, somebody has been caring for him. So it's easy for him to go to distraction because he won't have that feeling. There's no man in the world died that he's pregnant. It is the women. So that's what the concept I have, that, you know, they don't have more feeling or pain than a woman, because a woman is losing the husband, is losing the son, is losing the sister or the mother or the father.
Anna, how do you see it?
Well, it's something similar. A woman has the clue of life inside her body, inside her soul. Men have power. So we know how precious and how difficult and how many sufferings is behind the life. So we are always in favor of life because it is in our nature. That was all.
Well, you all have been very attentive, and we will be around for you to ask more questions of us individually. I'd like to ask Meliswe, you have a beautiful way with words and images, and why don't you round off this time together?
Thank you, Swani. I want to tell you a story which happened to a woman, and say to all of us, It doesn't matter how deep you go down, but you can always still come up and live high. This woman had 2 children, a boy and a girl, and they came to her house one day to attack them, to kill them. They killed the boy. They raped the mother and the daughter. They beat them up. They left them for dead. They burnt her home. She was widowed already. She didn't have a husband. She lied there with her babies, one dead, the other one injured. She was afraid to move. She did not know if her children were still alive until dawn. When dawn came, she got up from the bush where she was, and she went and touched her children. She found her son gone. She went and touched her daughter. She found her daughter still breathing. She crawled to the road and called for help. She found help. They took them to hospital. She buried her son. She moved from that place and went and resettled in we call them settlement areas. And she was hiding there because she did not know who it was that had attacked her and killed her child. Because we were doing our thing as this organization, going and having prayer meetings to attract these women, we went over to that settlement to take our prayers there. We knock at homes and we talk to people individually, and we found her, and she wouldn't just talk, she was just crying. We tried to speak to her, she was just crying. We prayed, we left her, we came back. We tried to speak with her, she wouldn't speak, until eventually she decided one day she is going to speak. And she told us who she was, where she came from, and why she is there. We helped her. We helped her find a bed to sleep on. We continued visiting her until she got out of there. And she got out of the shell. And she got out until one day she decided she's going to be the leader of that community. Today, that community where she was living, which she was leading, has been given new homes. And she is the local parliamentarian in that area. So it doesn't matter how deep down you go, you can still rise up and take it and go. Could we all stand up and sing Kumbaya?
Yes, maybe.
Kumbaya, my Lord, Kumbaya. Kumbaya, my Lord, Kumbaya. Kumbaya, my Lord, Kumbaya. Oh Lord, Kumbaya. Someone's crying, Lord, Kumbaya. Someone's crying, Lord, Kumbaya. Someone's crying, Lord, Kumbaya. Oh Lord, Kumbaya. Someone's singing, Lord, Kumbaya. Someone sing, Lord, Kumbaya. Someone sing, Lord, Kumbaya. Oh Lord, Kumbaya.
for joining Women Waging Peace.